law of prayer is the law of belief, right? Lex orandi, lex credendi. And if you pray but don't understand, what is your prayer life really like?
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Orthodox Christian Podcast. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Father Timoleon Prattas. And for everyone listening or watching, Father Tim, why don't you take a second to introduce yourself and tell everyone what you spend your time doing?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, first, Max, for having me here. My name is Father Timoleon Prattas. I'm a Greek Orthodox priest of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of Canada. I'm married with 2 kids. I came to Vancouver in 2014 in December. This is my first assignment as a parish priest here. Together with that, I'm the youth director of the Archdiocese. The spiritual director for Camp Metamorphosis BC, Camp Met, and also, again, trying whenever I can, I guess, to watch a Leafs game. Yeah, I will say what what team I root for, even though the Canucks aren't that bad. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Wonderful. So from what I know, you did grow up in the Orthodox Church. So just tell everyone a little bit about that experience, maybe from the early years, what that looked like at home versus, say, in the parish, and as you grew up.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a cradle Orthodox Christian, baptized, a few months old, together with 4 other kids. And I remember seeing video of the baptism, which is kind of cool because I'm going to be 41 this year. So, back then it didn't really exist. And seeing, so many people and just like a full church, it was kind of wonderful to see how everyone came together as a community of faith. And now, how we have baptisms and they're just like kind of standalone. And here I was with 4 other kids to get baptized. I was always very much inside the church. I wanted to be a priest since I was 3 years old. I didn't really want to do anything else. Everybody else wants to become police officers, firemen, lawyers, whatever. I wanted to be a priest. And I kind of felt out of place, I guess, when people asked me what I wanted to be. Then, through various things that happened in life, all of a sudden I just said, there's nothing to be ashamed of. Like, I want to be a priest, so what? And I should have done it earlier. I remember that I had said it in grade 8 in my class when they finally asked me. And I should have done it earlier because all the girls thought that it was cute that I was like living my dream, and all the guys came to me for dating advice and stuff like that, which is kind of hilarious, right? If you think about it. But it's like, who are we going to go to? Let's go to the person that, we think is a little closer to God, right? And then throughout high school, there were various things that were going on in the world at that time, like the war in Serbia, for example. And I remember that there was a Serbian Orthodox student that was there. We would go for lunch every second, third day to be able to chat and for her not to feel alone. And that's one of the things I remember. It's like, this is what being a priest is really like. It's not just saying, peace be with all of you kind of thing in the funny clothes that you wear. This is what you have to do. So, and stuff like that happened throughout high school. I graduated, went to the Patriarchal Toronto Orthodox Theological Academy, and got my bachelor's in theology. I became youth director of the Archdiocese for the first time. As a lay person, I remember a priest that told me, like, if you're actually going to do this job and you're going to do it right, maybe you should get some more training. I went to Tyndale Seminary in Toronto and did a master's in Divinity with a specialization in youth and family ministry. So all of a sudden I started to see this other side of Christianity that many cradle Orthodox people, we don't appreciate, I guess, right? Let's use that word for now, right? And that they can offer so much, obviously not the fullness of the truth, but they have truth and they have ways that we should be able to sit back and, in humility, to sit back and say, you know what, I am going to take that. I am going to be like St. Basil the Great said, and, be like the bee, right? And take what's good and leave the rest. So I really enjoyed my time there. After that, I got married. in 2014, and then after that became a deacon and a priest. I served for a while at Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox community in London, Ontario, because that's where my wife was from. That's where we were living, and like all of that. Now, all of a sudden, like the culmination being, this letter that I got and saying that I needed to come here. So I'm like, my whole life I've been waiting for this, right? As a cradle Orthodox, and then it was interesting to be able to have that. In Greek, it's called to charopion penthos, this joyful sorrow. The sorrow that I'm going to be leaving, my family, my wife's family, and we're going to be coming, to a foreign land, if you will, even though it's BC. It's wonderful here. It's fantastic. But the joy that I'm finally going to get to do what I always wanted to do, and to be able, by the grace of God, to be able to minister to these people that God has, entrusted me, just like He does for every priest. Being a cradle Orthodox Christian, I will say, for a very long period of my life too, was because we went to a Greek Orthodox church, and because the English translations were very few and far between. There's a lot of Greek. And it's something that we see over time, and especially with the Divine Liturgies Project, and now with the digital chanter stand, which I think is amazing. And every single person who goes to church should be able to, should go there and live the service. I think that we're going to a place where we always wanted to be, and with as a chanter first, myself, and now as a priest, to be able to see that journey where people chant along with me, that it's not an opera, that people are understanding more, and this level of catechism that was an afterthought in the beginning, now slowly but surely, especially with efforts of my brother priests who are amazing, that now all of a sudden catechism is key.
Okay, so just to go back to those
sorry,
early
that was
stages.
kind of a long-winded answer, I guess, right? Of my journey. I'm sorry about that.
No, absolutely. It's a good frame, and now we'll just investigate some of the different aspects of that. So you started by talking about how when you were 3 years old, you knew that you wanted to be a priest, and that just intensified throughout your life. So that's a pretty unique story. So what was it about being a 3-year-old, or if you can have any memories of that time, or maybe things that your parents have told you? How did you know so young that you wanted to be a priest?
I always liked going to church. I felt that it was like my second home, and sometimes I even wanted to be there more than home. I love my parents. I love my home, but it was this otherworldliness that I felt even as a kid. And my grandparents who lived with us, my dad's parents, especially my grandfather, when I said that I wanted to become a priest, like a lot of people that want to become priests, at least of what I've heard from them as well. I started to play church at home. So we would come back from church, we would have lunch, and then we would go upstairs and have this, like little liturgy or whatever and he would be my chanter. And I loved that it was that I would be able to kind of live this, unique liturgy, if you will, right? And then I sit back and I'm like, yeah, I really like this. At the same time, when that was going on, I knew that I really wanted it because there were people, inside the greater community, and even some like distant relatives and whatnot, that were like, you should be a lawyer, you should do something else, it's silly kind of thing. Like, we go to church, but we kind of don't believe it, even though they didn't really come out and say it like that, even though one of them did. And then it was, no, you're absolutely wrong. And that Christ is the way. I remember after one of those things, it's like, I totally know that I want to be a priest if God will have me, because He gave me so much. And this is just like my little piece of the mosaic to be able to give back to Him. So yeah, that's and after all of those experiences, right, it was like it just intensified, and just that's how I knew, right? And I'm kind of glad that it was from 3 years old rather than like from later on.
Right, right. And what would the home life be like at that time? Like, did you guys ever have prayers at home, or how was Orthodoxy expressed in your home itself?
I would pray I don't think that it's the kind of like picturesque, let's stand in front of the icon corner all together. I know that like we would pray obviously at meals, we would pray at nighttime all together. I pray a lot with my grandparents. Uh, Incense at home. Um, Venerating icons, and then that thing that I told you about the playing church, which for a child, obviously, is you're not playing with toys and Legos and all this other stuff. You're want to dedicate yourself to God. So I would say like all of those things combined was that expression. And as we all got older, obviously, like those things changed, right? When I became a chanter, it was very difficult to be able to have that home prayer life for me personally, because it's like, well, I kind of got it out of the way. Right? It's like I checked it off this imaginary list that exists. And then it's like, well, okay, I don't need to do this anymore. And it's like nothing could be further from the truth, because then it just takes you away from where you really need to be, and to have that Christ is your center, and
Mm.
prayer life is not just about words. It's about that, not even connection, that communion that you have together with Christ, and to live that liturgy after liturgy, like Father Alexander Schmidt says in one of his
Mm.
books.
Mm. And in terms of being involved in the parish growing up, was the liturgy conducted in a language that you understood? Because I know for some people raised in Orthodoxy, it's actually an older form, say, of Greek that's being used that's different from the modern vernacular.
Yeah, so 98% of the Divine Liturgy was in Greek, so it was just and I would have to chant it as well. Like matins was 0% in English, and don't you dare, kind of thing, say anything in English. So it was good for me because I was able to connect that way. I found it home, but so many other people were like, I can't connect because I don't understand what's going on, and that's why something like right now in my parish, if I see one person that I know doesn't understand Greek, we will do like a true, as much as we can, a truly 50-50 matins and liturgy. And I think that a bigger problem, the two big problems back then were the lack of liturgical books that are translated into English, and a lack of the personnel. Because if you don't have a chanter that is going to chant in English, or they think that it's horrible or whatever, for whatever reason they have, then you can't really do anything. The priest is kind of handcuffed. That's why, like, I glorify God that here I am not handcuffed, and that all of my chanters can chant in English and in Greek, and it's fantastic. So,
Mm. Mm.
yeah.
And so it sounds like it was performed, or the liturgy was done in a language that you actually understood. So what I was getting at there is sometimes it might be more the case in Russian parishes where it's like an old church Slavonic that contemporary people don't actually speak anymore. So it sounds like though in the
Yeah.
parish you attended,
Um,
it was modern Greek.
no, it wasn't modern Greek. It was
Okay.
it was that liturgical Greek that was being said. Now I'm saying that, like, now as a priest, it's different. Back then is this liturgical Greek that people insisted on, as if it's a tie into the old country, tie into our our history and whatnot. But then when you would go up to them and you would just say, I want some of the liturgy in English, and they would say, no, you have to do it all in Greek, the way that the church says. I'm like, okay, fine, let's do a little test. And I said to them, what does eti ke eti mean? Like that. And they would always say, so ethos, right now in Greek, if you use it to say the word year, but that's spelled with an ita, with a iota, the way that it is in the liturgy, it actually means again. So etiquette, everyone would always say, for years and years. I'm like, you're wrong. You don't even know the liturgy. I go, that you're going to. You don't know what we're saying. And they go, why? No, it means that. I go, yeah. But with a iota, it means again and again. And then they would look dumbfounded. And then it would be like, why do you go to church? And then all of a sudden, this longer conversation would begin of, the reasons that we go. And I think that for people that wanted that change, it was hard fought. And then it was a very slow progression. I don't know what it's like now in the, 2 out of the 3 parishes that I was at as a kid. As a teenager, I went to the cathedral at the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary in Toronto, and as a young adult there to go and chant. And the priest there was quite insistent on Greek and English, and that was the first time that I ever saw this type of attempt at a balance in my life, and I loved it. I'm like, this is how church needs to be like.
So when you were being raised and when you started to chant in church, was the liturgical Greek something that you slowly acquired over time that was more of like a technical skill for participating in the liturgy that I'm kind of curious, would other people raised Greek have that familiarity or that ability to understand liturgical Greek, or was that something more particular to you?
More particular to certain individuals. Even when I was chanting a lot of the stuff, it would just be, sounds nice. I know how it's chanted because, this is the model hymn for it. But do I know what I'm saying? And even that question is, should be asked even today, right? And that's why, this insistence on one language that is, again, like Church Slavonic, for example, we should sit back and we should say, the law of prayer is the law of belief, right? Lex orandi, lex credendi. And if you pray but don't understand, what is your prayer life really like? And it's not an indictment on the language or anyone. It's an honest question. And that's why I think that as much as I wanted to connect back then and to be a good Orthodox Christian, that huge piece of the pie was missing, that understanding. And all of a sudden, when these things that we have now that we take for granted are available, it's like, wow, why couldn't this have been, years ago? But you can't dwell on the past. You can only take a look at the past so that it serves as a model for what the future should look like and shouldn't look like, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. And so were there other elements of your life being raised Orthodox that were unique in terms of, sounds like you're raised in Ontario, may have been in sort of an Orthodox community and had some friends there, but I imagine that you're mixing with the wider culture as well. So what were some interesting aspects about just being raised Orthodox that someone not raised in an Orthodox setting would maybe find interesting?
Something that's unique. I think that someone that's not being raised in an Orthodox home never has the appreciation of, I'll say a funny one first, of having that, other day for Pascha, for Easter, right? And having to take off Good Friday at school and being like, well, like all your friends and people that are in class are like, well, why do you get this day off? It's like, well, actually, this is what we celebrate. And it was a momentary time for witness. So that's something that I think that people can't appreciate that aren't Orthodox. In the greater community, to be able to connect with other people, obviously, that are Greek Orthodox, and to see kind of church through their eyes as well, I think was really beneficial and something that people can't understand because, you know, because I knew what I wanted to do. It was also like very subtly of what am I getting myself into? Does that make sense? And it was kind of like a test ground. Like, well, what do you like? Oh, you like this. Okay, why? And then to be able to take that and say, okay, how am I going to be a better priest? It was like, again, this 3 years old until the moment of getting assigned was very much a very long journey. And that's why there wasn't like anything like I would say like, oh, I went to youth group all the time, or I did all these kind of activities. It was going to church, chanting, going to seminary. Like these are the things that I was interested in. Other people and other clergy friends of mine, they had youth group. I remember that some of them they even went to New York. They went to Greece, the Holy Land, and these things were really good for them. And I actually met a friend of mine after the trip, I think, to the Holy Land, and he went for a service. And it was literally, he was off the plane and he went to the service, and I saw him in these flip flops, and I'm just like, "What are you doing, right? Like you're in church, right?" And then we met and we became really good friends. So it's like I know that was there for them. That wasn't my personal journey, though. So I'm sorry that it kind of lacks, for the answer. But that's also the thing that makes it like unique. And that's something I think for people that are not cradle Orthodox Christians and that are searching or even that have gotten baptized, there is no one way to be an Orthodox Christian. There are no boxes to check other than the confession of faith, right? All the other things are ephemeral at best, and sometimes they bring us down at worst because it's like, well, I didn't get to do this, or I didn't have this experience, I don't have these group of friends. It doesn't matter, right? All of these things are just extra stuff that makes your icon look nicer, if you will, right? But sometimes the simplest icon can still be the most beautiful.
Could you, it kind of sounds like you're getting to that notion of like capital T tradition versus lowercase t tradition. Could you maybe speak a little bit about, from a Greek perspective, what are the things that are beneficial but unique aspects of Greek Orthodoxy that aren't necessarily capital T tradition? If that makes
I
sense.
remember something very liturgical, right? I remember learning this in seminary that the service of the sacrament of Holy Unction is done for Greek Orthodox communities on Holy Wednesday, and yet it's not done for everybody else. And I was like, whoa, but this is like the thing, right? So I thought that was really interesting. And again, it was the first big thing that I saw that was a small t tradition that I thought was a capital T. And then all of a sudden, in for Greek Orthodox people, customs, the small t of um, inside the church how we celebrate certain saints, and that we are more prone to celebrate them than, for example, the evangelists, right? Like they're the ones that told us about the Lord. And then going to like for myself, programming a service and having a divine liturgy either in the morning or in the evening for the evangelists, and so few people show up, and yet if it's one of these quote unquote popular saints, that the church will be full, or at least have way more people in it. And I think that's something that is unique to every single ethnic Orthodox church, Greek, Ukrainian, Romanian, Russian, whatever they are, because everybody has their favorites, I guess. For Greek Orthodox as well, that marrying of culture a lot. Whereas I remember once I got in a bit of a verbal spat with another priest because it was March 24th in the evening, which for us is the Vespers of the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary, and I did English, and he goes to me, Like tomorrow is Greek Independence Day. It should be like, it should be a sin, he goes to me, to speak English. And I'm like, well, the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary is for everybody, right? It's for the entire human race. So I don't know what you're talking about. And I think something like that, equating national holidays with these feasts is good, because it will bring people to church, obviously, and for anything, just like the crowns in a wedding were taken from pagans and they were Christianized, right? To be able to take these holidays and to be able to Christianize them and show our devotion to God and our thanksgiving to Him. But at the same time, it's also bad, because then people are just coming for the fun. Let's put it that way. And it's not. You don't come to church for fun. You come to be united with Christ and with your neighbor, to fight your demons, to be able to ascend the ladder, if you will, rather than just sticking around and just saying, I'm happy here. I don't think that any martyr ever said, oh, this is good, right? That's okay. They're the examples, of faith that we need to be like. And that's why these small t traditions, liturgical or otherwise, and like people, yeah, seeing them just to come for Pascha in the evening at 11:50 to take the light, not even wait for the gospel and to leave, kind of thing, is like, we have made the holy light a beautiful thing inside of our tradition. Now we've made it into an idol, and that is not good. The holy light is a holy thing, but anything holy can still be made bad if the person takes it and defiles it. And that's why, like, these kind of things bother me. It should be, we should show it the proper respect that it deserves. The flower on Holy Friday from the tomb of the Savior, right? Like, that's more important than chanting along and stuff like that. It's not everybody, like, thank God, right? But the vocal minority sometimes drowns out the amazing people that are around that want this relationship with God through their neighbor.
Right. Yes. Yes. And it's a good tie-in that you mentioned with the martyrs, that it involves our whole lives, and it is often uncomfortable, and that God, unfortunately from our perspective, not from His, but doesn't save us from suffering, but saves us through it. And the work of the liturgy is often difficult, and it takes a lot of effort, and you're standing the whole time. It's tiring. It's, you have other things that flash through your mind, but it's important. So, were there certain challenges that you encountered along the way, being raised Orthodox, that you had to overcome?
A grade 10 teacher once told me, my math teacher, goes to me, that I celebrate the real Easter. I celebrate it this week and not next week. And that, I remember, just like, I was so angry, because because I'm like, how does he have the audacity to say something like that? And then as you get older, even older from that, you find this type of hostile attitude, and then they'll some people, and so some people will just discount you just because you're religious. That's just a general problem of some people in society today, right? Other people will say, well, being Orthodox is wrong because of X, Y, Z. I saw this on YouTube. It's like all of a sudden YouTube has become the arbiter of truth. No offense, obviously, to the podcast. Listen to this podcast, people, right? But we have that, and then the other side, where it's only a certain brand of orthodoxy that we can subscribe to, and everything else is hogwash, and you're stuck in the middle of this vortex. Going to the Protestant seminary, I was in a class that was a church history class, obviously through their perspective, right? And one of the students that were there made fun of the Theotokos. And I bit my lip because I'm like, I don't really want to start this debate right now. At the break, I go to the professor and I go, listen, I'm going to leave because I'm very upset. But like, these guys need to learn that, Christianity is not simply their version of Protestant, right? And maybe to have a little bit more respect. And I remember that I left, and the professor, spoke to them and said, "Hey, listen, what you said you might find funny. Some people laughed in this class, and yet, um, you know, this is what one of the students in here believes." And then all of a sudden, kind of everybody went quiet because they thought that I was still there. So you have these things that happen, but again, the discomfort is just something that's part of the deal. If people think that Christianity is comfortable, they don't know what Christianity is. Then Jesus should have died of old age instead of on a cross for our salvation. Um, and that's why I hate the song "What If God Was One of Us," because he became like one of us, right? He died like we're going to die. He suffered like we suffer. And I'll challenge your thought, by the way, before how, like, unfortunately for us, we suffer. Suffering sometimes can be the best thing for a human being, because we find out that without him, capital H, we are just lost in this sea, and without a rudder. And all of a sudden he shows up, takes the wheel, and then all of a sudden there's this calm, in the world. So suffering, not that I wish suffering obviously on anyone, because that's just horrific. But I do pray that if anyone, like myself in my life, various times, and everyone else, whenever we do face suffering, that we know that the one who allowed it to happen still loves us and that he'll be with us on the journey.
Absolutely. And here, let me run a thought by you, and you tell me what you think about it. But I'm of the opinion that difficulty perfects humanity, that the only way to become complete, and that's the sense of perfect that I'm meaning there, is through difficulty of some kind. And that this is just the nature of reality. And sometimes I think we're tempted to think of this post fall, like after Adam and Eve strayed from God, that now suffering is a part of the world. And I think that kind of suffering there's a certain taint to it, but the notion that just difficulty is the way that humans become more like God, and that's been there since the beginning. I think there's an argument for that, in the sense that Adam and Eve actually faced this temptation in the garden, and it was obviously difficult because that's why they fell away from God. It wasn't just this easy test that was administered to them. And so I wonder about this notion that just part of who we are has to go through difficult things, and that's the only way that we grow as individuals. And so that in the long run it is much better for us, and that's sort of the divine perspective on it. The human perspective is, it's horrible, I don't want to be in this, get me out of it. But do you think that that is a fair maxim to have in the Orthodox Christianity, that difficulty perfects humanity or saves humanity?
I would say that it perfects humanity. Yeah, definitely. Because again, if they persecuted me, they'll persecute you. Like, it's in the manual, right? And so Jesus told us to prepare us that being a Christian is hard. It's very difficult, and that goes from catechumen to newbie Christian to Christian all of your life, and you're ready to die, on the bed of pain and death. Um, I recently saw some people that were in a lot of. It was the end of their life, and they actually passed away a couple of days ago. I've known these people since I got here. So this one woman who passed away, I went to her thinking that all of this suffering that she had went through, that she would be inconsolable. She gave me hope. That's the right word. She was just like, God granted to me all of his blessings throughout my life. My life is his. And I was just blown away. I'm like, what am I doing here? Right? So it really is how you see your life and how you see that suffering. Sometimes, again, suffering for a sober person will be like, obviously, God does not will suffering on anyone. He allows it to happen, right? Which is very, very important, differentiation that we need to sit back and say. But through that, you can make that suffering yours, if you will, or you can allow it to suffocate you. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm a diabetic. All right. So I've been a diabetic since I was in grade 7. I can use that and say, well, you know what? I'm gonna, woe is me. It's horrible that I can't have cheeseburgers all of my life, kind of thing, and eat and drink whenever I please, right? Or I can sit back and say, and I sometimes have the struggle of the first one. Don't get me wrong. Okay, that's the part of being a human being, right? Or I can sit back and say, God allowed this to happen to me so that I can become healthier, so that I can give glory to Him and to be able to thank Him for everything else that I have, and to be able to show a level of spiritual maturity in a world that is filled with people who sometimes do not act mature. Because let's face it, having any kind of disease, whatever you want to call it, right, is not easy. But people have this hope. All of a sudden, they sit back and they have a way. They can see the way to true peace that only comes through Christ, and that happens by going through. I think it's through the in the Epistle of Barnabas that says, those who seek me shall go through tribulation and despair. Right. I remember reading that in Bishop Carlos Ware's the Orthodox Church, right? As one of those little quotes, and like if it was good enough for the martyrs, it's good enough for us.
Yeah, well put. So you mentioned some of these challenges, some of these external challenges that you faced being raised Orthodox with people that would sometimes mock the faith or have a different take on it. Were there internal challenges as well, maybe as you navigated some of those small T traditions versus the capital T traditions, or other things that were inherent to growing up Orthodox?
Internal. I remember once I thought, why can't I become bishop, and because I have to be unmarried, right, kind of thing. And I went to an ordination of a bishop, and I love the glitz and glamour. And for one day I was like, well, maybe I should think about it, maybe not, and stuff like that. And the next day I remember, like, that struggle happened for a day, and then the next day I got up and I'm like, yeah, this is totally not your path. What's the matter with you, kind of thing. You're doing it just for the glitz and glamour. When I would be chanting, the beginning, when I first started to chant, a big struggle was the priest would always say, oh, look, he's such an amazing chanter, stuff like that. And I got that for like months, every single week. And then one week he didn't say it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, why didn't he say it? Wasn't I good? And blah blah blah. So this this ego that has been, it's been watered and everything, and it's this hideous plant that's in front, all of a sudden takes a blow. And yeah, that's not that was something for me. I remember just like looking back, that was like, yeah, you never want to go there, right? And this can happen even for someone who is, researching the faith, right? Not even a catechumen yet. It's like, well, look at you, you're taking initiative, you're being so good, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you see that person again, be it at church, Costco, wherever, and and they don't give you the same praise. And it's like, well, why? Did I do anything? No, you're not doing anything. You got it in the moment, it's done, and that's it. But that we seek to gratify ourselves and to be able to think that we're checking these mysterious check boxes to get into the kingdom of God. Whereas I think that all of us need, and myself first, all of us need a little bit more humility, and the world would be a better place.
It reminds me a little bit. I heard a Catholic priest once say that initially, when God is drawing us to himself, he'll give us these tasty things, like these candies, as it were, and almost appeal to our vain thoughts, because that's what he's dealing with, and he's drawing us to himself. And that at a certain point, and this is more prevalent in some forms of Catholic theology, where God, quote unquote, abandons us or stops doing those nice things for us.
Yes.
And that's actually a gift. And it gets back to that notion of suffering and how it's something that is, it matures us. It's, I think, in similarity to even having kids, right? Having kids is very difficult work. It confronts you with all the things that, all the ways you're selfish, but it makes you into a much better person, I would argue, because it shows you how to care for other people when it's inconvenient and you don't want to do it. And so it seems the same thing with God, that, you know, he gives us these nice things at first and then sort of strips those away. And it's hard, but he's leading us to a good place in the end.
Yeah, definitely. Any person will tell you, I love waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and changing dirty diapers, right? Is totally lying. It's a truth. No one wants to be woken up every single day at 3 a.m. and then 5 and stuff like that to be able to deal with that kind of stuff. But that's also part of being a good parent, that you're going to sacrifice. Otherwise, I have news for you, all right? It's only going to get more interesting as children grow up. And with faith, it's in the Old Testament, we find God dealing with babies, if you will, right? With Adam and Eve. And then, preteens, then we get to adolescence. And then all of a sudden the fullness of time comes, as St. Paul says, right? And then, God is dealing with this adult now. If we think of ourselves, in that way, where are we on that journey? We could, someone could be 80 years old and they could still be an infant spiritually. And that's why it's important to be able to gauge, like, this kind of topic, where they are, for the priest, confessor, the person that's helping them on their journey in the Orthodox Church. Don't think that that person is where you are, because the moment that happens, then you're trying to make a mirror image of yourself, right? But you want to be like Christ. You don't want to be. You don't want this person to be like yourself. You want them to be like the Lord. So yeah, that's what I guess say about that.
Mm-hmm. And throughout your journey, there were obviously other options on the table, I imagine. I mean, you're being raised in Canada. It's somewhat of a secular society. It's going more so in recent years. And being Orthodox
Understatement
was
of
yeah.
understatement today, big time. Yeah.
Being Orthodox was obviously not the just the norm. It wasn't like you're on autopilot and that's how you found yourself being Orthodox. So why did you choose to remain Orthodox?
Why did I choose to remain Orthodox? My grade 12 law teacher implored my mother to become a lawyer, for me to become a lawyer, because she's like, he has such a gift and stuff like that. And my mother just turns to her and says, you can go tell him yourself, kind of thing. He's sitting right there. It was a parent-teacher interview. Because again, it was just the only thing that I ever wanted to do. It was this, it can't be qualified into words, right? That there was nothing else that I could do that would make me happy, I guess, right? If that makes sense, right? So that's why I always saw that. I would say for people that are listening and watching today, happiness comes from being united with Christ, because he is true happiness, unadulterated happiness. And the moment that you see, through, God willing, the advice of your confessor, your spiritual guide and whatnot inside the church, that you see that happiness, in the distance. Sometimes you'll have to walk and sometimes you'll have to run, but don't sit down. You still have to keep on going. And that's how I saw that part of the journey. Sorry, just like with all of this, so many memories again, just like come to the forefront, right? And yeah, for advice, you want me to say about advice, by the way, to people that
Well,
are sorry.
maybe before we get to that part, that is
Yeah,
definitely
sorry.
the direction I want to take it in. But you mentioned that true happiness is found in communion with Christ as we know Christ, and that at first sounds like a bit of an oxymoron in the sense that Christ leads us through suffering, and yet there's some sort of joy there or happiness there. So can you maybe talk a little bit more about how you're defining happiness?
It's how do I define happiness? Um, Again, the not into words. The love of God manifest in our lives is how I would define that joy, and that happens for a cradle Christian from the lather of regeneration and in baptism, to the wonderful moments that we do have in church, that we choose to have in church, the various relationships that we have with family and that are grounded in Christ. The moment that we see the other as an icon of Christ, I think, is a moment of pure joy, because then all of a sudden we know that by the grace of God we've actually matured spiritually. Because Max, you're doing this, and this is a service to the church. And if I don't see you as an icon of Christ, then like I fail, right? So I think that all of this joy to be complete is to take a look at an entire icon of Christ with kind of like a mosaic icon, right? And every single part of the mosaic is every single person that you'll meet, and how you will act with them, and how they act with you is their choice, right? But that joy is to be able to give what we know. Uh, Christ telling us to love God with all of our being and love our neighbor as ourselves to our neighbor. And the moment that we do that, then even if they don't like us, even if they hate us, they're still a piece of that mosaic. And then this icon of Christ becomes more and more and more complete until the end of our life, when, God willing, it will be a full icon. And then when we shut our eyes on this earth, the joy will be complete, because that icon will be that living, breathing Christ meeting us at the kingdom, wiping away our tears. And it's like that for me, I guess, is the ultimate joy, to have Christ at the doors of the kingdom of God, wiping away my tears and saying, welcome to the kingdom. Like everything else is just a prefiguration to that greatest joy. And the greatest of that is participation in the Eucharist, and to be able to receive the Lord's body and blood for the forgiveness of sins and life eternal.
So I'm just going to try to summarize that, and you let me know what you think of it, and
Yes, and
I'll
I'm
put it
very
in a
sorry
slight
for the
frame.
long-winded answer. So
No, I think
classic
it was
Greek
a good.
priest style, right? Long answer that can be summarized in a sentence.
So if I was going to summarize it, I would say that happiness is something like, there's the emotional side of it, which comes and goes and is very fickle, and you can't rely on it at all. That's like a horrible foundation to build anything
Yeah.
on. But then there's this sense of, and I'm going to try to borrow some of what you were saying, but just put it in different words. So the sense of becoming who you are meant to be, that is true happiness, that you are on the right trajectory, that who you are is something in the future, as it were, that you have this potential that you're trying to realize and manifest through the grace of God, and that as you're aiming towards that and approximating it and growing in maturity, that's how you know you're happy. And then the other aspect of that is less just focused on the self and more outward, in the sense that when other people become Christ to you, that they are means to Christ. And I think maybe what you could say with that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that you can see others' actions sometimes in a mysterious way as willing your good, because love is when you will the good of the other person. At least that's one definition of love. And so it seems that if we trust that even in the suffering, that Christ is somehow perfecting us, that the actions, even from someone, say, like an enemy, can be understood as something that is transforming us, that's actually pushing us closer to Christ. And in that sense, we can be happy in those moments or joyful in those moments. And then obviously the other people that aren't as malicious, they aren't our enemies, we can see them even more so as Christ's love towards us. But would that be a valid definition
I
in your
think
mind?
that's excellent. And as I was listening to it again, it's like joy is theosis,
Mm,
becoming partakers of the divine nature, right? As Saint Peter the Apostle says. I think that is real joy, and everything else other than that real joy is either a prefiguration to real joy, like holding your kid for the first time, let's say, right? Getting married and stuff like that. It's a precursor to that, or it's this false joy that the world brings by likes and people that see what we do and congratulate us and stuff like that. All of this is just it's vain. So it's a matter of choosing the which path is the right one and to be able to take that path. But um, yeah, I really like the summary, Max. Congratulations! Wow, thank you. You took a jumble of things and made it really good. So thank you.
well, I'm glad that it passed the test of Father Tim. So that's important to me. So in conclusion, I mean, we've got some time still, but what would be your advice for someone that's interested in Orthodoxy? We've got people listening that maybe aren't attending a church. They're intrigued by this Orthodox thing that they've stumbled across. What would be your advice to someone like that?
Okay, so number one, you are you're always welcome, and we never leave anyone outside in the rain. But you're not going to fix the church yourself, right? Number two, you are not expected to come in and all of a sudden everyone will be your friend. It's going to be very intimidating for even other people to come up to you sometimes, even though they have the best of intentions, because they just don't know, they're shy, whatever. So I would say when you go to a church, especially a new one, I'm not saying you should go around to everybody, but see who you think you can jive with and just reach out. Sometimes it's as simple as, let me just get that, water for you or something like that during the coffee hour downstairs, or just simply saying good morning and the other person saying hi. Hi, I'm someone new. And I know that's really, really difficult for a lot of people because it's scary, right? We're afraid of the unknown, but it's important to do. I think also for people that are looking at orthodoxy, I think it's important to be able to find your spiritual guide, your spiritual father, your confessor, and for them to be someone who is grounded in faith and to be able to listen to what they're going to tell you when it's going to come for the for your preparation in before baptism, because the moment that you're really serious about it and it's not just something's this is just something to try and that's it, because there will be that phase too, right? Like you want to see what all this orthodoxy business is all about, but then all of a sudden when it's more than just that and it's like, yeah, I actually am starting to really believe this, or I do really believe this. When any new person comes inside, see again who you gel with, who you're going to who will help you on this spiritual journey, and uh, through your spiritual fathers, through your spiritual guide, to be able to get closer to Christ. Don't sit back and think that you have to read every single book on orthodoxy, because sometimes you might not necessarily find the best literature, or even that you're going to find things that you can't understand. Like you're not going to pick up St. Maximus the Confessor and start reading. If you do, you're not going to understand a lot of what you're reading. And to be able to, the first time that you go to your parish, even though they might not necessarily be your spiritual father, your confessor, even though it usually ends up that way. Connect with the priest, even though, yes, he's busy with everyone else, he will find time. Any good priest will be able to find time for you because you're still in the image of God. You're on this journey, and, you know, God willing, he's going to help you on this journey. So take the time. Don't worry. It's our job. Like, you know, if we can't do that, then that's, you know, you have to kind of ask why. Like I remember once there was an inquirer for to become Orthodox, but it was the same day that I was leaving at so liturgy finished at 11:30 and the flight was leaving at 2 because I needed to go for a clergy meeting in Ontario. And it's like, okay, listen, wonderful to meet you. I can't talk with you right now because I'm going to be late for my flight and Air Canada's not waiting for me. So so that's why give your priest some grace as well when you go and see them. And they did come and see me afterwards, so that was cool. Ended up getting baptized. It was fantastic. And take a look at every single day as one new step to the kingdom of God. Every step will not be the same. Sometimes they will be amazing experiences, amazing days, fervent faith, feed me to the lions kind of thing. I'm going to confess Jesus. And then other times it'll be like, this is so boring, or I don't get it. I'm upset with this person. And a lot of times when people don't come back to church, it usually traces back to, I got in a fight with this person, right? Or this person spoke rudely to me and I just chose not to go back. Don't allow Satan to, go inside your heart and pitch a tent there because some person decided to act in a wrong way. Your relationship together with Christ in his church is more than just one person being rude.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when someone is new to something, it's easy for them to take a single instance and blow it out of proportion. So when you first go to an Orthodox church, it can be easy to encounter someone who's maybe a bit of a jerk there and think, oh, maybe this is what all Orthodox people are like. And that's the same phenomenon that we have, in many aspects of life. And it leads to unhelpful stereotypes. So it sounds like that's a part of what you're getting at there. Just, take it for what it is. There are people there. They're working out their salvation. They're not all perfect, but there are good people, and you will find them if you stick around.
Yeah. And one last thing, I think, for Greek Orthodox churches that I found that has been really, it's irked me at least. They call them Greek churches. I'm like, we're not pagans. I tell those people. And anyone that's listening to this that is a cradle Christian, it's like, it's not insert whatever you want there, ethnic background church. It's the Orthodox Church. So if inquirers or catechumens hear that, we go to the Greek church, don't necessarily correct because they'll be like, oh, you're just new to the game. But just remember, it's the Orthodox Church. We love you guys. We want to be able to help you in any kind of way so that you can come and get to know this, the person of Jesus Christ together with his Father from everlasting and the all holy, good and life-giving Spirit, and how much this God loves you and me and every single person. But we can't do that, simply through meeting for coffee or simply through one service. This is one of those things that it's like Tertullian says, Christians are not born, they become. So, that process of becoming, God willing, at least for, people that come to this parish, and I can speak for a lot of other Orthodox churches here in BC, because I'm blessed to have an amazing brotherhood of priests here, some who have been on this program right here. That process of becoming is really prevalent with a lot of us, and we want to help you become, and hopefully you will help us become as well.
Well, that is a wonderful place to conclude for today, Father Tim. So I want to thank you for your time. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure been mine. I pray that God blesses you and sanctifies you and everyone who's watching.
Thanks for watching that episode of the Orthodox Christian Podcast. If you have a question about Orthodox Christianity, there is a link in the video description that you can check out, and it'll take you to a Google form. Also, if you know someone that would be a good guest on the podcast, you can definitely put that contact info in the Google form, and I will do my best to reach out to them and see if they're interested in coming on to the podcast. And the final thing is, if you found something of value in this podcast, please share it with one friend or family member. And in the meantime, I hope that you have a peaceful week. Take care.